Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. First we're going to start with the southern direction. According to Ukrainian sources, the Russian army has found a new way to harm Ukraine with the help of fighter jets. The Russian airspace forces began to deliberately keep MiGs in the sky for 3 hours in order to harm the Ukrainian economy, says the speaker of the Air Force of Ukrainian Armed Forces. So this is the new tactic that the Russians are trying to use for many purposes, obviously to discover the Ukrainian air defense forces, because obviously that at some day the Russians will launch significant number of missiles to destroy the targets they managed to discover during these days. The most important updates also during the previous night we got from the Kherson direction, and the Ukrainians intensified their actions on the line between Pridniprovskaya and the Poima. So in this area we see the Ukrainians' activity with FPV drones, and the main reason of intensifying actions from the Ukrainian side is the Ukrainian problems in Krynki. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Russians launched a series of counterattacks, and currently the Russians trying to clear this territory and to force the Ukrainians to step back. So that's why the Ukrainians took a decision, let's say, to open this second front line and to force the Russians to redeploy some reserves in this direction, which will allow which will give the Ukrainians some time in Krynki to develop the foothold and basically to make a normal rotation, because they are under very heavy fire from the Russian side in that settlement. The Russians from their side are trying to bomb and attack the Ukrainians, because the Russians also see that probably the Ukrainians are going to restart their offensive operation here, and the Russians try to prevent the Ukrainians to launch offensive operation, to prevent, let's say, redeployment of their forces from Krynki in this direction. So very interesting and complicated battles in this area, and obviously sooner or later the situation will be finished, and we'll see what is going to be next. Very interesting updates we got also from this direction. The video was published by the Ukrainian forces from the city by the name of Radinsk, and let's take a look at this video because this is very important. On this video was made by the Ukrainian forces. On this video we can see how the Ukrainian drone was flying in direction of Russian armored vehicle. This is the Russian armored vehicle, but the Ukrainian drone missed, and basically the Ukrainian drone hit the ground, let's say the surface of the ground. And then the Ukrainians launched another drone, and using the second drone probably they managed to get the target. So what is important in this video? First of all, the Ukrainians, as I see, managed to develop, or they're trying to create something like Lancet or analog of Russian Lancet. Obviously they still have a lot of problems. They still don't have like the 100% technologies to be 100% accurate like Lancet, but they're moving in this direction. So obviously if the special military operation continues the next year, obviously the next year we're going to start seeing the Ukrainian analogs of Russian Lancet. At least that was the first examples or some tests in this area. Now we are moving further to Abdf Direction. We got a lot of very interesting updates from this territory, and the most important of them are coming from the area between Stepova, Очеретина and Keramik Novokalinova. According to information we have, and most of the mappers, including the Deep State map and Syriac map, have already updated their maps, and according to them, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over the 3 lines that located on the west from Krasnogorovka. And from this area, during the previous night, we got just one video, just one geolocated video, the Russian heavy bombardment of this territory using like artillery rounds and just regular bombardments. Maybe that was something like artillery preparation. As you can see, the quality of the video is not so good. The events took place during the very late morning, early morning, so there is a fog, so it's very difficult to understand where exactly all this thing happens. But for example, this is that was the chemical plant in the Terikon, and we see that camera moves to the right, and this is exactly the area we are talking about. So after a very long artillery preparation, very powerful and heavy one, the Russians launched an offensive operation, and as a result of probably something like that, they managed to establish control over the final 3 lines and the final fortifications roads, let's say between the railways. And according to information we have, according to the most of the mappers, the Russians finally established control over this territory, and basically the Russians complete the creation of the full front line, let's say at least 5 kilometers length front line, combat line that they can use for further offensive operation in many directions, in direction of Berdichi, in direction of Stepova, Petrovska, in direction of Очеретовато, the railway station and the residential area between the railways, and of course to the north in direction of Novokalinovo and Keramik. So the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians. There are panic among the Ukrainian soldiers, and the sources are saying that soon the Ukrainians will be forced to leave Avdiivka. Furthermore, other Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish full control over Stepova, and currently they're not even clearing, they have already completed this clearing operation. The Ukrainians were forced to step back further to the west, and currently, according to some Russian sources, the main Ukrainian positions take place somewhere here. So we see that the situation is getting worse, obviously. Now we are moving further to the north in direction of Horlivka. Today we got more details about the clashes that took place yesterday. As you can see, I have updated the map, and some Russian sources, very reliable sources, confirm that as a result of clashes that took place yesterday and the day before yesterday and during the previous week, the Ukrainians managed to establish control over this landfill, this area. I still haven't colored this territory. We need more details and more information, but according to some sources, this is the current situation in this area. The Russians tried to return control over this territory, but they haven't managed to force the Ukrainians to step back. The only thing that the Russians managed to achieve is to develop some foothold in direction of the central part of Shumy, and basically they entered the residential area and the let's say eastern part of this village Shumy, but there are no more buildings in this area. There are just ruins, and probably the Russians will try to continue further their offensive operation, let's say to cut the Ukrainians from this landfill from the north, to cut the supply roads. The only thing we have is another geolocation from the Russian side, how the Russian forces, artillery forces, were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians who were heading and who were trying, or who made another attempt, or the first attempt to take control over the second Terry Condon landfill in this area. So based on these videos, I must say that situation probably is critical for the Russians, for somehow they missed that attack, that unexpected attack, and this attack in direction of Horlivka. Obviously, if Ukrainians are able to continue developing their offensive operation the same way, can break and can ruin the Russian plans in Avdiivka, because if the Russians are not able to stabilize the situation in Horlivka, they will be forced to send some reinforcements and reserves from Avdiivka, from Krasnogorovka, from Stepova, from all those cities on the north in this direction for stabilization, and it will give the Ukrainians some time. Furthermore, the Russians need not just to stabilize this area, obviously they need to do something and to return control over the landfills they lost. So this is not quite good for the Russians, because one more time it can break their plans about Avdiivka. When talking about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, the Ukrainian sources reported that the situation is getting worse and worse for them every day. The Russians, after a very small operational pause on this direction, restarted their activity with FPV drones. They start bombing and attacking the Ukrainian trenches and positions in this area. There are artillery forces, there are strongholds, there are fortifications. So obviously this is the first phase before the ground operation with infantry. Now the Russians are trying to use just FPV drones, but the next stage is going to be another wave of offensives in direction of Bogdanovka and Kromova. Also, very interesting updates are coming from the northern part, from Kupiansk. From this direction, we have a video that we will not open. On this video, if you have access to the map, you can see the Russian soldier who was making video from the trenches, from these trenches, lots of dead bodies of the Ukrainian soldiers. And yesterday, if you remember, we discussed the Russian attack in this direction. We have the video of that attack. And for example, This is the attack. That was on the 14th of November, so probably the video of Ukrainian bodies in the trenches took place on maybe on the 15th. Anyway, today, this night and the previous evening, the Russians continued their offensive operation, and according to some sources, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish control over Ivanovka. For now, we are not planning to change the color of this territory. We need more updates, but some sources are saying that this settlement, this village, is already under the Russians. So we'll see. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.